Hello, my name is Dwayne Stradford, NERC Compliance Director here at TRC. I'm here to talk to Dr. Green today about achieving operational excellence in the NERC compliance space and also the best practices to apply and deploy at your company. We're here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania at the TRC Power Academy. One of the things we want to talk about is, we've always talked about some of the themes with NERC compliance, about how NERC compliance is a team sport, and about how we want to go about helping our clients leverage existing policies, procedures, guidelines, also workflows on how to achieve operational excellence. So would you say are some of the best practices out there that folks need to kind of pay attention to in order to achieve operational excellence?
Sure, it's a great question, Dwayne, and it's fantastic being here at our testing commissioning facility in Lancaster. This is a fully fledged control room and actually simulated substation that we bring thousands of individuals, both within our firm and through other firms, to participate in. And it's by being here, this is a great opportunity for me to answer this question. We are leaning into the reality that we need systems thinkers to be compliant and to build resilient and reliable electric grids. And this facility was in large part built to help improve the quality of training around understanding how whole energy systems work as our new workforce comes into TRC and also with many of the partners and clients that we're lucky to work with. So that if I were to just give you my broad take on what it takes in 2025 to be a compliant organization is a culture of continuous learning and an organization that is focused on security. And then finally, an organization that's focused on working together as a whole. And the reason why these elements are so critical right now is that the world we're living in is moving incredibly fast. This year marks one of the most significant number of NERC standards that are changing or being revised in the last several years. I suspect it's a record that's going to be broken again in 2026. And when you look at some of the major standards that are being updated, including things like inverter-based performance standards to allow for ride-through for power quality events, emerging standards around utilizing virtualization in cloud assets, additional standards around resiliency for cold weather events, in particular, in response to some of the events that have taken place in the last few years, and then finally, large load standards related to data centers in particular, which is an unprecedented amount of growth that we're seeing in the system. What those items really reinforce is that the system is fundamentally changing, and it's changing very quickly. And the only way that we're going to be able to maintain resiliency and reliability for our customers is to be a fully on board and engaged culture focused on continuous learning, on growth, on team building, and ultimately on security.
And NERC compliance being a team sport, in some of those best practices, have you seen folks where they often increase the amount of communication they have on a regular routine basis, where they share NERC compliance action items across boundaries from a departmental standpoint? I can think of, like with the generator owner, transmission owner, registered function, like with FAC 8 with facility ratings, and PRC 5 with substation maintenance, and FAC 3 with vegetation management. You classically have a line of demarcation between the generator owner and the transmission owner. And sometimes if there isn't that level of communication there might be gaps that naturally form if there's not an intentional effort to go up and beyond the line of demarcation. What would be some of the things that you would advise folks in?
Yeah, Dwayne, that's a great question, and obviously, this is an environment that lends itself to operational risk just because of the rapid pace of change we're dealing with. Organizations that I've seen that have been able to be successful in this environment focus on not just compliance, but on outcomes as a whole, in particular the outcome of maintaining a resilient, reliable bulk electric system. So the most successful organizations that I've seen have repeatable processes and systems for managing their assets, and actually also for managing continuous growth and learning as events occur, and events do occur in any large operator almost every single day, but using the systems that that they've built for their operational processes and extending those into being compliance management systems as well. That allows for better and more consistent documentation, which translates into better transparency for stakeholders.
And then the other thing that I think is very interesting as we talk about organizations that are looking to achieve operational excellence, what do you think about from a recruiting standpoint? A lot of times, of course, you put into the job description for NERC compliance personnel what they have to do on a regular or ongoing basis, but it's those folks on the periphery that have NERC compliance obligations, indirectly or directly supporting that. How would we go about encouraging more explicit details in that job description on what they need to do in order to help the overall corporate compliance posture? And two of the things I'm thinking about is like with HR. You know, HR has an opportunity to help out with like SIP4 personnel and training standards as it relates to, say, example, the revocation of NERC SIP access within 24 hours of personnel changes. And you look at telecommunications, they have a great impact on the TOP standards that deal with the SCADA RTUs. They also have a great impact on the control center COM diagrams of operational desk communication links and all that other good stuff. So how do we encourage those folks on the periphery to kind of also participate in the NERC compliance program?
Sure, Dwayne. So great question. Again, beyond compliance, the biggest risk I actually see in the energy industry right now is talent. And hiring, training the best talent in the industry. There is a significant gap when you look at the amount of infrastructure investment that's needed, both new infrastructure, but also operating all of the assets that are already in queue or are already now installed and commissioned. There's a significant gap between the amount of people we have in this industry, the amount of resources we have in this industry, and the amount we need, and that gap is actually getting bigger year over year. So now more than ever, finding the best talent is absolutely critical. It's fantastic to be talking to you in TRC's simulated substation training facility, because we've taken a very proactive approach by training some folks right out of school into this industry. So that would be one recommendation I would have, is just to say, I wouldn't expect that the market's going to have everybody that we need, and organizations need to think about how to best also train the staff they're bringing in. The second thing I want to bring up, though, and this comes back to the theme overall, is that the intent of compliance is security and resiliency. And this is a national imperative that we build a safe and secure bulk electric system for all of the customers we serve in our communities. And that's, to me, a really, really important component of advertising, not just for firms like TRC, but for our industry as a whole. That for individuals who are interested in national security and interested in resiliency and building an electric grid that is fundamentally able to accommodate the types of assets that are coming online, like an increasing amount of renewable assets, increasing the number of data centers, that this is the right industry to get into and to work. So to me, the story is actually less about compliance and more about helping to reshape the world and to help better position the United States as a fantastic place to continue to grow businesses and industry as a result of the fact that we have a safe and secure bulk electric system.
And do you see the opportunity for public-private partnerships, especially like with community colleges, to get folks engaged in the setting up a curriculum for like control center operators, for field technicians, and what have you? Do you see that as another driving force behind that resource or that pipeline of professionals in the power industry?
Yeah, I think 2-year degrees in trade schools are phenomenal avenues to bring in talent in this industry. This industry also has a fantastic legacy of training. And part of it is because of the rapid pace of change. The equipment that we see back here, the types of relaying that's being used, many of these pieces of technology are just a few years old, despite the fact that we're working and living in a 100-plus-year-old industry. So it's just fascinating to see how quick this industry is changing. The best organizations are not necessarily the number of years of schooling folks are going to, but rather just the quality of organizations to build curriculum that is ever evolving and to help train new talented individuals who have a mindset of continuous learning.
Right. And a lot of times too, when we talk about performance, we talk about compliance, a lot of times we talk about governor risk and compliance tools, GRC applications, what have you, in order to track the overall compliance performance of different teams. And you talk about the compilation of data, operational data, kind of tracking performance and everything in that regards. What kind of compelling metrics do you think we could develop or help our clients develop as it relates to being able to show that they are deploying a lot of these best practices and start tracking some of the lagging metrics they want to improve on, like say pre-audit RFIs? You know, there are a lot of times auditors will give you RFIs classically because that's what they feel comfortable doing. But those are great opportunities for process improvement, like with the RSOLs, with the reliability standard audit worksheets, where you can say, hey, if I keep getting this RFI all the time, it might be time for me to change my approach with evidence, with my policies, procedures, guidelines, and how I handle my day-to-day work. What are some of the things that you're seeing as potential performance metrics to kind of track?
Yeah, great, Dwayne. So first, I want to just make a comment about the statement you made, because it is a fantastic statement. The most successful organizations from a compliance perspective are organizations that recognize that their compliance obligations are opportunities to build a more effective organization, an organization more oriented towards continuous learning. Despite all of the serious and increasing cybersecurity threats we see on the system, despite the increasing growth of intermittent renewables, despite the increasing use of cloud technology, despite the increasing number of significant and extreme weather events we're experiencing, the overwhelming number of misoperations are still caused by human performance errors. Actually, about 43% of all system misoperations are due to human performance errors. And so the data point for me is that ultimately, at the end of the day, continuous learning organizations and organizations that are focused on building operational excellence are the organizations that will be not only the most compliant, but the most resilient as a whole. And for me, metrics that are so critical for organizations are those operational metrics. Things like quality as a metric. Not just that the task was done, but that the task was done right and that the task was done consistent with what the organizations that are administering them expect those tasks to be. The organizations that are able to do that and have better performance with regard to compliance consistently have better reliability, performance, and consistently actually have better financial performance as an organization too. So quality is a huge tracking item that I would recommend that all organizations look at. Organizations that have rolled out GRC tools or are thinking about rolling them out should really think about how they are being rolled out in the context of overall work and operational management systems that they're building throughout their organizations.
Right, and a lot of times when we talk about those metrics that you want to track and kind of go from there, from a stick and carrot standpoint too, do you kind of look at it from a corporate perspective where you want to encourage folks to operate in that space by looking at financial incentives, like talking about bonuses or what have you, where, you know, folks tend to sometimes get motivated by tying NERC compliance to financial incentives with raises and bonuses. Is that something that is kind of also out there for a kind of motivating factor?
I'm not the expert on building incentive systems, but I'll say just as a human being, certainly rewards feel better than punishment. I think there's numerous opportunities to build incentive systems that align our workforce to outcomes. So this is one of those areas for sure. Something that I think is also really critical as we're thinking about structuring these types of incentive systems, which I'm not opposed to, is to also remember that the significant amount of events that take place, oftentimes that take place in real time, are often contributed or even caused by latent errors that took place in the system, sometimes from months or even years earlier. And so as we're thinking about how we are tracking performance and how we're also incentivizing and rewarding those involved in the process, we have to remember that while these events happen in operations, they're oftentimes caused or at least contributed to by latent errors that took place early on in planning and engineering processes. And so whatever systems we think about building, we have to think about them as whole organization systems, both for incentives and also penalties overall.
Right, right. And then when we look at NERC compliance from the aspect of building in more of those incentive structures with the team and being more of a partnership across team lines, we talk about communication as one of those foundations of communication, collaboration, and cooperation as it relates to working across departmental lines, trying to break down those silos. What are some of the things that you've seen successful organizations do in regards to improved communications and cooperation?
Dwayne, the organizations that do the best in communication do the best in how they're tracking operations and how they're managing their operations as a whole. And to me, what this really comes back to are human performance-based operating programs that leverage the same tools that you would expect in a system operations and control center used throughout the entire life cycle. So when it comes to communication, that means leveraging tools like the use of three-part communication, leveraging checklists, documenting and writing down handoffs to make sure that there's clear handoffs, leveraging systems that have tracking. So that means not sending something over text message, sending something over email. Even if you think it's not a compliance activity, but as we've been discussing throughout this discussion, everything ultimately ends up being a compliance activity when you're dealing with the bulk electric system.